So hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Andrew Auld, and I'm going to be going through most of the slides. But the first thing we wanted to say, and it's really sorry that Paul couldn't be with us today as well, but he's contributed to our thinking in this presentation, is that it's a testament, we think, to the Koha community that there's 3 different vendors on the same stage doing a presentation about the same thing and thinking the same way. And that's not exclusive, us 3. We vendors in the Koha community work really well together, and I think that's a really good sign for the community. So that was the first point to make. This presentation, though, is about how well the community is working, how well the project is working in terms of keeping the quality of the code going, keeping development going, keeping all those wheels spinning. And we want to raise a few questions more than anything else, but we've got some thoughts too. But it would be good to have a discussion beyond this conference, at this conference in the next couple of days, and then beyond this conference about how we keep going on this great journey that we're all on. We've, as these 3 organizations, we've actually been, something some of you may not know, is that we've been funding, directly funding, as in paying money, QA in the community by actually paying Jonathan Druart on a monthly basis. We have a sort of monthly stipend as organizations to Jonathan to keep, to help keep things going. And then there are other organizations that do similar. So we're not the exclusive benefactors by any means. There's a lot of time given and money given by others. But it's worth knowing that that has to happen in order to just keep things moving along. Because I'm a little bit scared about of George and about underrunning, and I had the great opportunity of spending a week in Colorado before coming along to the conference. And so I thought, well, why not share some holiday snaps? Because that's got to be a great way of filling time. But I also thought it fits with the theme of elevation, of leveling up, because you're at high elevation when you're in the Rockies. And it certainly was great to get some views. There's a bit of blue sky there as well. So I wanted to pick up on something that Andrew Preeter mentioned earlier, and he used the term free software for free open source. And yeah, he's right. You know, it is, you download it free, you can use it free, it's freely available, the code's freely available. But one thing not to confuse with the word free is that it's free because we all in this room, you all and lots of people out there put a lot of time and effort and money into this software to make it as good as it is. So it's free in many senses, and it's also not free in other senses. So that's kind of something to bear in mind as we talk too. And again, just thinking about what has gone into it over the years, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the history of Koha because a lot of you will know that, and there's lots of information out there about this. But Koha has come from a great deal of effort. So people put effort in from library organizations, do development, individual interested developers just around the world do great work and spend a lot of time developing in Koha. And also the support companies do a bit as well. So we do that either we're directly funded by libraries to continue with development. Is it not getting my good side? Okay. We also put in some in-kind work as well, as I'm sure you'd expect us to do. And then there's loads of people have done stuff. And I looked on the Koha website, the history site, just yesterday, and I saw that there have been 449 developers who've had patches pushed into Koha, which is amazing. I did also see that the last one was in December 2021. So listen to the presentation tomorrow about getting involved, and maybe you could be the next one and the first in 2022 to have a patch push. That would be really cool. So yeah, get on with that. There've been loads of releases. There's loads of minor releases. There's people involved in translations and the release teams, the quality teams, and so on. There's loads of stuff that happens in the community. And that's just, if you don't ever go to the Koha dashboard, then go to the Koha dashboard and see just how many people put stuff in. And this is updated each time there's a new release. The dashboard starts again, and every year you can see how many sign-offs are happening, how much stuff is being passed through QA. And the other interesting thought I thought about this, and we'll reflect on it in a minute or two when I do some slides about diversity, is that it's quite a diverse list of names up there as well. So that's a good thing to reflect on. But nonetheless, it's not free. So we do need to find a way of keeping this thing going and keeping it growing. There's a tree theme in my images, if you pick up on that as well. So what do we mean by funding? These are some of our questions. How does the community better facilitate joint development investment? And how do we keep things moving along in Bugzilla and in the QA pile? And also, how do we ensure that the Koha gift is available for future generations? So we talk about Koha and the meaning of Koha, and it's a gift, but we've got the use of the gift right now, but we need to make sure that people in the future have the use of the gift of Koha going forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the software lifecycle and the open source software lifecycle. And this is nicked from, the references are all there, the Linux Foundation. And they talk about the lifecycle following proposal, incubation, mature, core, and archived. There's many who will be able to tell you all about the history. And there was a great presentation at KohaCon 2020 about those first couple of phases for Koha. And there's a link there to the presentation who gave the presentation? Rosalie, Rachel, and Chris Cormack gave that presentation in Wellington. So if you want to go back and learn about where it came from, then do that. We went through presumably an incubation stage. This is way before my time. I wasn't even born. And then I was debating to myself about whether we were in mature or whether we'd reached core yet. So mature being, it's had several successive releases, it's on track with its vision, challenges might still exist. That feels a bit like us. But maybe we're a bit further on than that, actually. We've got a broad audience due to the value. There's massive value of Koha. We've got a really broad audience, so many libraries all over the world. And we do need to focus on maintaining and keeping the pace steady. So I kind of think we're in core. And the scary thing about that is that the thing that happens next, if you follow this cycle, is that it's finished, it's the end. So we don't want that to happen. Back to some tree images. So is Koha a core project, and what does that mean we need to do to keep it going and keep its life going? And visiting the Rockies, a couple of things that really struck us. One, how beautiful. Two, lots of dead trees. I don't know whether any of you've been there, but it's just full of dead trees. And this is a global warming issue. There's a thing called a beetle, a pine beetle, and it's attacking because of global warming and warm summers, and the trees are weak because they're not getting enough water. The tree beetle is getting a hold and thinning out the trees and killing loads of them off. And I thought that was quite a good analogy to if a project, software project is getting core and we start to lose focus, we could see some thinning out of the trees in terms of contributions, in terms of the quality of assurance processes, in terms of bugs getting fixed. So there's a few dangers that could come about as a result of that sitting in that core status for a long time. And in the forest, in just above Grand Lake, this is the result of what happened with all those dead trees. So they had a wildfire in 2020, and it devastated a huge area. And it was because there were so many dead trees already, because the beetles, the fire got hold and spread and spread and spread. So we certainly don't want that to happen to our wonderful Koha project. So it's really worth thinking about how we fend off the dying trees, the worm, the beetle, or whatever it is. So there's a few thoughts that we have about how we keep Koha from entering its twilight years. And there's thinking about making sure you really keep the community vital, vibrant, and as many people involved as possible. and make it as welcoming as possible, because the more people are involved, the more people will have ideas, the more people will add to the product, the more people will help fix things. So I had a question about whether we're diverse enough, whether we are welcoming enough. It was an excuse to put an elk photo in. I'm not suggesting there are any big bulls in the Koha community who dominate at all, please, out there, anywhere in this room. That's not the suggestion. It was just a good photo. But are we diverse enough? And if you look at open source projects more generally, this is some research from 2017. If you look at open source projects, they're not terribly diverse in terms of the communities and in terms of the contributions. It raises the question for us, are we diverse enough? And I think we do pretty well, actually. So I reflected on that dashboard slide about the, you can't really tell particularly from that, but there's some diversity, certainly there was in that in terms of gender, certainly, that was greater than 5%. And that was just on an eyeball. But we're also massively diverse in terms of how global we are as a community, how well adopted Koha is globally. Where KohaCon has been held, and it's a great feature of the community that KohaCon is held on a different continent every year, and that's meant that it's been held in all of those locations. The diversity of the presentations in this conference so far, and we've had contributions from different countries, from different people, from different genders, etc., very diverse. And we do have a strong focus on accessible development in the community, which is terrific. There's a real focused work going on about the OPAC accessibility and all of that stuff, which is really important, and the staff back end as well. But can we do better? Of course we can do better. This is the Level Up conference. So we want to think about ways that we can do better. We don't actually measure how diverse, how welcoming, and how inclusive we are, and should we or could we? Are there ways that we could track some of that stuff and therefore just, you know, benchmark ourselves and do a bit better? Our code of conduct, and there's recommendations that all open source software projects should have a code of conduct. Ours actually refers to holding the conference. So it's a code of conduct around holding the conference, which is great, and we should have one. But we could also have a code of conduct that's about the project itself, about how we welcome new people, how we make sure people don't feel excluded, how people get involved in. I was talking to Nick yesterday about ways of encouraging new developers and not putting them off at the first hurdle just because they get some, you know, they need to get some honest feedback if they're new and they need to be helped, but keep them in, keep them involved because we need them. It's a question in my mind, and I'm a non-developer. I'm a Dunsey Doodle fluffy person. Let's use that word. So for me, IRC is a bit of a strange world, and I'm not sure it's, for me as a member of the community, it's not an area I feel comfortable. And I wonder if there are other ways that we could make more people feel comfortable in communicating with each other and getting involved. And is our guidance as good as and as encouraging as it could be on the websites and on the wikis and so on? And there's going to be some great presentations tomorrow from the ByWater team about getting involved and using Bugzilla and so on. And they're going to be kind enough to put some of that information up on the community websites afterwards as well. And there are loads of tips there, nicked from other people, Linux Foundation and folk like that, about fostering a really good inclusive open source space. I'm going to hand over to Jonathan now. He's going to talk a bit about keeping Koha from its twilight years by working on continuous development, keeping the good feature ideas coming.
Thank you very much. So it's sort of concerning this twilight years. How do we keep Koha going, keeping it vibrant? And I think new features are a huge important part of that, because we also have to remember that you know, not only the world's changing around us, it's things that are appearing now that maybe weren't around before. And Koha's always got to keep up with that. It's got to keep up with the changing library landscape. And I just wanted to talk about a little bit of work we're doing at the minute. I want to specifically talk about the Koha ERM. I'm talking about it tomorrow, so I'm not going to talk about it in detail. And that, by the way, is at 10 o'clock after the frankly over-promoted 9 o'clock session about the Koha community. So you're welcome to come and see that. But I mention it in particular because I think it is a very good example of this co-opetition that we were talking about earlier in the week. And it sort of came out of a telephone conversation really between the three of us and, you know, well, all of us here and Paul, and just a discussion, you know, what are we going to do about this? We need an ERM. Are we just going to sit back and do nothing, or are we going to actually, you know, do something about this? And it's important to say that it is jointly sponsored by us, which is great, and you know, you maybe would expect us to do that. But it also highlights a few things I felt, and one is that actually we're not financially poor in terms of the money that can be invested in it. There's money to be invested in it. And, you know, to be honest, we could go out and probably find even more money to invest in this sort of project, but we are time poor because between us, we all have limited resources. You know, we've got other projects on the go. You know, we can contract out work, but there are only a limited number of hours and there's work to be done on it. So a problem is that we are time poor. So we need more people involved looking at these things. And it also highlights the challenges of sort of bringing together just input into these sort of projects. So, you know, we've effectively defined the specification for this piece of work, but, you know, how do we open it up to solicit opinion from other people? And, you know, as Andrew mentioned, you know, what channels are there that people feel comfortable engaging in? And we can quickly solicit feedback and input. And that does make it hard to solicit input, particularly when we are a global community, which is a great thing, but also provides, you know, presents a challenge because we have people across the world who are using different knowledge bases in the context of ERM. How do we make sure that we cater for all these people? So although it's, you know, it's great that we are thinking about the future and we don't want Koha to reach its twilight years, we do need to think about these problems. And I think Nate now is going to talk a little bit about another way of addressing that, which is really about crowdfunding.
Hello, everybody. Hello, world. All right, yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing to try and make it easier to do devs. So for a while now, we've had this crowdsourcing development page. And what this allows our partners or other members in the community to do is cherry pick developments that you may want to see if you happen to have a couple extra bucks laying around. And what's great is we're starting to see a larger adoption of Koha by much larger institutions. And in many cases, that comes with more funding. And the amount of money that they're saving by switching to Koha, a portion of that is sometimes earmarked towards future developments, which is awesome because that gives companies like us the ability to hire more developers, which we are planning on doing in the future to expand our development capacities and to be able to kind of handle a larger influx of custom development requests. So anybody who's listening that may want to apply, stay tuned. So this is one very easy way to do that. So if a library is fortunate enough to have a couple grand laying around in their budget at the end of the year, they can scroll through this page and say, okay, you know, I want to move long overdue cron config into Koha, and I've got a couple bucks left over. Boom, I'll throw it at it. So this really kind of highlights the point that even if you're a small library and you might only have a couple $100 to contribute to a development, that doesn't mean that you can't. If we have $1,000 development, we don't care if it's 10 libraries with $100 each, or if it's, you know, whatever. The more people that are involved, the better, because then we get different perspectives of people who think, you know, who are thinking about how this development should work, perspectives that a single funder may not even consider. We also have a really great ecosystem within the vendors in Koha, where we work with each other on custom development. So, you know, if we don't have the capacity, we will outsource it to another vendor and vice versa. So, we're thinking of ways to kind of increase capacity so that we can create more development faster. So this is kind of like what a detailed view would look like on the website. And you can see there's a $5,000 goal. We've raised $1,000. This is a great opportunity. If someone was like, oh, I got a couple $1,000 sitting around, boom, hit it. Another thing that's important for our company, at least, is that, if a lot of our customers are requesting a development, but the funding isn't getting done, ByWater will kick in the extra money. If it's a $5,000 development and $4,000 of that is funded, and we have, 50 people saying this is really important to us, we're just going to pay for it, get it done, and roll it out to our customers. Because at the end of the day, development is kind of customer service, right? We want everybody's experience that are currently using Koha to be the best possible, and we want to make Koha as attractive to future libraries as possible. So everybody wins, right? The vendor side and the user side. It's pretty cool. So typical development roadmap, we break out the roadmap into two pieces: architecture and feature developments. A lot of the times the architecture isn't that sexy and it's hard to get money for it. So most of our internal funding goes towards architecture development. And that's where you're going to see a lot of the Koha vendors coming together and being like, look, we're not going to get this funding because it's not going to pass the board, because, the people with the purse strings are going to be scratching their heads and saying, what the heck is this? So let's just get it done instead of wasting time. But the vast majority of all the features and enhancements that we develop come from you, our partners. So you're the ones who direct the flow of this development. We listen to what you say. We don't develop based on what we think we can sell. And that's a big difference between Koha and proprietary solutions. You've got proprietary vendors that are like, well, we're going to push this out. We're going to make people think this is important, whether or not it is. And we're just going to grind it into your head until you think that our system's the best. I'm a little jaded, but but in the Koha community, it's like, all right, tell us what you want, we'll develop it, we'll make suggestions on how it can be better, more widely adopted worldwide and in terms of library type, and then boom. So yeah, it's a much better way of looking at things. And then once that development is done, we submit it to the community, and DZD, Dunsy Doodle. So with that, I'll pass it to my esteemed colleague, Brendan here.
All right. First of all, there's two interesting comments that I've heard this week that were said to me. That the first one was, we all use software every day, but when you get a chance to have an impact on that software, you like using it a lot more. That was said to me by Christopher when I first got here. And then right when we were walking up here to sit down, there's this another person I just met, David. And what he said is, he said that I have to keep reminding myself that this is not a product, that this is a project. And that what I wanted to talk a little bit about was just how it's important for all of us to be involved in this. And so how can we do that? There's a great talk tomorrow at 9 a.m. I've heard. That will discuss that kind of stuff. But first I wanted to pull back a little bit. How QA works in Koha is the development is completed and it is put in through Bugzilla, handed to the community. And then at that point, whoever was the original developer, that institute needs to find someone else from a different institute to sign off on that. So the sign off is testing it and just making sure that the code is good. And then that is passed on to another team, and that's the QA team. Now, if someone from ByWater, so we always have people that work on the QA team, and we are the ones who submitted the development, we are not the ones that can pass it through QA. So that's why we were talking, Andrew was talking a little bit more about, we do a joint QA of a third party. So that way, some of our developments that get out there, hopefully he has time to do that. But also we want to be fair and make sure that he's QA and everyone else's too, so that we can keep the bottleneck going. So that's when Andrew was talking a lot about these questions that we need to ask. So are there barriers to this that could be slowing the project down? Should we investigate maybe some different rules on that? Now, there are meetings, another barrier, IRC for Andrew, so he may not be able to get up there to ask this question of a bunch of other developers. So that's where like we need to be involved in the community to be able to discuss and ask these questions. And that's a lot of where we see QA going. And then also there's other interesting ideas, like maybe the Koha users group here, koha-US, that they would maybe invest some of their time into either learning enough about Perl to be able to volunteer on a QA team. What the QA team does is they will test the code, but they also read through the code to make sure that it passes the coding guidelines. So it could be an investment in education, doing Perl classes, doing different things like that so that we could promote this group to be able to help QA. The talk tomorrow, of course, is going to talk about like how to sign off. And so that's really a challenge that I'd like to make for everyone here, is I'd like you to all to sign off on bugs. So what that's going to do is you can test it, you can sign off on it, and it's going to move it to the QA thing. So then if we see that the QA pile is getting too big for us, then as a community, we need to come together and investigate and ask questions of how can we get past this barrier. All right, and I think the last slide's you.
Yeah, so that was kind of what we wanted to talk about in a nutshell. The only thing I forgot to say at the beginning was I shamelessly used our new slide template because we've had a little branding refresh. And so I thought it was a great opportunity to do that, even though there's 3 companies here, I nicked the slide template. And I wanted to make sure that you didn't miss out on our stickers that we brought for you. So up on our table, and this is 2 reasons for you doing this. One, you get a good sticker. And the other thing is you get your 10 steps a day or whatever it is by going up the steps. So on our table, go and get one of these cute little library shelf stickers because we brought them for you. So that was the last thing I wanted to say. So thanks for listening. This was about asking some questions and hopefully stimulating some thoughts about keeping things going, keeping the momentum going, and keeping the ability for us to pass this gift on to the next generation and beyond. So thanks very much. Any questions? Oh, and all the links, by the way, take you to the references and to our contact information as well. So the slides will be shared.
So I just have a comment to add to that. And we talk about barriers. You know, I have dabbled in trying to contribute to the code, not just my jQuery hacks that I do a lot of, but I've contributed a little bit, and that was back when I could get the dev box working at the time, and then that became more frustrating. And that was the biggest barrier for me, was the fact that when things changed in the environment, that I had to rebuild things. I had to figure out why it wasn't working and get it working again. My hope down the road, and maybe this would be a help to more people than just me, is that there would be some kind of shared environment that we could log into and work on our projects, our code or whatever, and contribute rather than having to maintain, because that being the biggest barrier for me is the fact that I don't have the time, unfortunately, to maintain that and contribute the code. If I had an environment that I can work in, I would love to work that direction. I would love to be able to contribute more code. I would love to be able to figure out problems. I would also love to be able to be confident enough to contribute to QA. So that's been my barrier. So.
Great idea. Noted.
Any other questions or comments? All right.
My school has a computer science program and they do coding. So I'm just curious if there's been any effort amongst the koha-US group to reach out to either high schools or places where I know a lot of your libraries have hackathon kind of things and maker stuff. And has there been any effort to reach out to the next generation? Because honestly, as librarians, we need to do that more often in general in our group, because there's so many questions about how, well, do libraries and librarians need to exist in general? And coding is another place that, yeah, there's lots of sexy coding jobs out there, but this is pretty sexy stuff too. And it really can impact a whole lot more people in a lot of really great ways. So I'm just curious if there's been any efforts in general for that.
So our next presentation that's coming was how, I'm not sure how to say their name correctly. It's Aisha, I think. She started as an intern in New Zealand, and then eventually did enough through this program they have called Classmates. And it's where a bunch of high school kids come together and they learn how to sign off on patches and test some code and write some simple patches. But it could be a good program for koha-US to have that. And you could get support from developers. I mean, we would offer developers from ByWater to like help shepherd that kind of thing. With interns, usually if they can have some kind of little stipend, you'll get a little bit of a bigger pool. And so that could be something that like the koha-US group would like stand up or sponsor. And then like, of course, we'll have resources to help with the actual technical teaching and stuff. And then Kelly can do her class.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.